So this is, as I said, part of our fall speaker series focused on sparking conversations about the technological, regulatory, philosophical, and existential questions posed by AI. And we do have a lot to get to, so I'm just going to do brief speaker bios, and mainly the speakers can introduce themselves. But we're really glad that they're here with us. So Jason Crawford is the founder of the Roots of Progress Institute, a nonprofit dedicated to building a culture of progress for the 21st century. And he's also the author of the Techno-Humanist Manifesto. We also have with us, you can't see her right now, but she will be visible imminently, Amba Kak, who had an unexpected conflict, but we're super grateful that she's able to join us. She's the co-executive director of AI Now, a US-based research institute where she leads on advancing diagnosis and actionable policy recommendations to tackle concerns with artificial intelligence and concentrated power. And she also recently completed her term as senior advisor on AI at the Federal Trade Commission. And we have Brian McGrail, policy lead and senior counsel for the Center on AI Safety Action Fund, a nonpartisan advocacy organization dedicated to mitigating national security risks from advanced AI. He previously served as senior advisor to the Deputy Secretary of Commerce. And last but not least, this event will be moderated by our own Jonathan Zittrain, BKC's faculty director. So before I turn things over to Jay-Z, we have kind of a special opportunity for you all today. If you can go to the next slide. So we are going to be piloting something called the Event Assistant. The Event Assistant is a tool that's built by our own Applied Social Media Lab. It's a tool basically to kind of like optimize the way that you engage with events. So we want to make it easier for you to stay engaged, for you to kind of get the most, retain the most from our events. So the tool listens into the event and can help you catch up if you get distracted, if you miss anything, if you don't know what a particular word is. So you can ask things like, what organization did they just mention? Or I zoned out, what did I miss? So if you want to use the assistant, and this is for folks in the room, folks online as well, go to berk.mn/AI-triad to try it out. And important flags, this tool uses an OpenAI 4.0 mini model through the Harvard API proxy. A pseudonymous thank you, message log is visible to the engineers, and we store the event and message transcripts for no more than 3 months. And then also, we would love to hear your feedback on this tool, so please share it after the event at berk.mn/feedback. So thank you so much, and with that, I'll turn it over to Jay-Z.
Well, thank you so much, Jess, and thank you all, both in person and online, for joining us today. At the Berkman Klein Center, I'm too loud, aren't I? Do I sound too loud?
Not me.
No, just to myself. At the Berkman Klein Center, we are really interested in trying to look around corners when there's a lot of attention on something, to see where the attention might be least but still deserving, and to have a really big tent to contain multitudes. Within our now 30-year longitudinal community, there are really committed, imaginative, interesting, smart people with all sorts of views, and trying to reconcile them and understand where the differences lie and whether they are normative, differences of ought, descriptive, differences of what is or what will be, is a large part of what we try to do in various ways. And this gathering today is exactly part of that quest. In the forward-looking sense, like, we did reserve a Myanmarese domain name for brk.mn. That's exactly how far ahead we were in internet studies back in the day. And we're hoping to do something equivalent as we look at AI. And I think of the philosopher Buffalo Springfield, who observed there's something happening here, what it is ain't exactly clear. I think that's not a bad lodestar for what's happening with AI. And for me, I was struck at one point when I was in the Bay Area of visiting in Berkeley with a number of folks deeply, deeply concerned about and committed to AI safety and worried about catastrophic and at times even existential risk from the progress of AI. And within the same day, I had traveled across the Bay Bridge to San Francisco, where a place called AGI House was madly trying to summon the demon. I'm maybe not being as purely descriptive as I could be here, trying to advance the progress of AI as quickly as possible. And not only did they have, as best I could tell, very different priors, but very different cultures, different vernacular they would use describing things, and tend not to communicate with one another as much as the short distance between them geographically might suggest. And those 2 points at the top, what I call, and I'm also interested in workshopping the names here, the Safetyist locus, which loosely speaking are folks worried about what AI might be doing and how quickly we are all becoming guinea pigs in an uncontrolled, non-IRB'd experiment about what some form of, at its extreme, geniuses in a data center may be doing for or with us. Another point of this triangle being what I've called accelerationists, people who are really thinking the sooner we can get, again, to an approximation, geniuses in a data center going, what diseases can we cure? What advances can we make? How can we help ourselves be better selves in a better society? That seemed another point, maybe with agreement that AI stands to be transformational, just different emphases on its risks, on how controllable they are, and what we maybe should be doing now, whether to promote or to limit things. And then a third point of this triangle that may be less thinking of it as transformational, but still significant, or what I have thought of as skeptics. Folks who are looking at this as yet another technology down the pike, possibly like internet, possibly in its day, maybe the day is still now, like crypto, all sorts of technologies that may stand to reinforce existing hierarchies, to carry with it risks and unintended consequences that may not be existential or catastrophic, but are still quite significant and worthy of paying attention to. And I won't try to chart them right now on a graph, but I'm really interested at the risk, which is itself significant, of being unduly reductive, understanding that all generalizations are false. Without meaning to pigeonhole our guests, as we start our conversation, I'm curious how that rough grouping might land with them and with you. And in fact, before we start talking to the guests, we might as well, in grand Internet Engineering Task Force tradition, and apologies to those online, we don't have a similar online poll to do concurrently, I'd like to call for a hum in the room if you agree with each of the following propositions. So get ready to hum when asked. The first is, when I heard what I call the safetyist position described, that sort of more or less captured the predominant place where I'm at right now. I'm being you right now. I'm you, you're me. Okay, so if you're feeling kind of safetyist right now, let me know at the count of 3 with a hum. 1, 2, 3. All right, so modulo the uncertainty of our very first hum, that seemed to be suffusing the room pretty decently, if uncertainly. If you are feeling, bring it on, I cannot wait, what a time to be alive, and if you're an AI, what a time not to be alive. Let me know with a hum at the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. All right, so the accelerationists have a certain degree of higher pitched hum, vibrating at a higher frequency, very excited. And if the skeptic position is moving you, if you're feeling like you're not wanting to get too carried away with things, but there's still plenty to worry about, let me know with a hum. 1, 2, 3. All right, Team STS in the house. very interested to know, and I know there are some people who hummed more than once. That's okay too. And if you're like, this whole thing is reductivist, I don't like humming, let me know with a hum, 1, 2, 3. Pretty good, although I guess within the seeds of that question is why people aren't humming. All right, so with that introduction, if it's okay, Jason, I'd love to turn to you first to just tell us, open-ended way, your sense of what lies ahead in AI, what our choices are, and as a bonus, what quote-unquote techno-humanism means to you.
Yeah.
Take it away, Jason.
So what lies ahead? AI is something big, and for a while now, I think the question has been sort of like, just how big is it? So a few years ago, I remember people in tech, and my background. So I'm a writer now. My background is in tech. For a long time, I was in Silicon Valley and did tech startups and that kind of thing. And I remember for a while, people were talking about, we're kind of in a transitional period. The internet, was sort of like, we've had a bunch of great internet companies. We had social media era. What's the next big thing? For a couple of years, everybody was asking, what's the next big thing in technology? Is it VR? Is it crypto?
What is the writer's room cooking up for us?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So now it is extremely clear to everyone in Silicon Valley, AI is the next big thing in computing. Economists are starting to ask, actually, is AI the next big thing in the economy? So like a general purpose technology at the level of like the steam engine, right? You could go further than this. You could say maybe AI is the next big thing in like human evolution. So we had the agricultural age, lasts about 10,000 years. We had the industrial age for the last 300 years or so, 250 to 300. And then are we entering an intelligence age, right? Is this as big a transition as the Industrial Revolution itself, which would make it bigger than any one invention within the industrial age? And then there's another set of people who are wondering, is this actually even bigger than human evolution? Is AI a new species that is sort of coming in to compete with us? Is this not the next era of humanity, but the end of the human era and the beginning of something else? So those are that's like 3 or 4 levels where you can look at things. Personally, I tend to think about things, more at the level of like, are we entering a new intelligence age? I think the biggest thing to think about with AI is, could it be to mental labor what engines and energy was to physical labor? Like, so a technology, a fundamental platform comes along and automates a whole lot of the labor that is there to be done, and assists with much of the rest, and just becomes a step change. If you look over the centuries and the millennia at economic growth rates throughout history, what you find is that economic growth is not a smooth exponential curve. It's actually faster than exponential because the growth rates increase over time. So just schematically, economic growth was like maybe 2 basis points in the Stone Age, maybe 20 basis points, 0.2% in the agricultural age, and then jumped up to 2% in the industrial age. So if an intelligence age were to follow, it would be not crazy to think that we might see something like 20% GDP growth, right? Annual GDP growth sustained over a long period of time. That would be absolutely transformative for the world. So that's what I think about.
Got it. So you very helpfully put a lot of framing questions on the table. It sounds like so far your answers to those questions are generally on the yes, it's significant, yes, it's transformative, this is not a drill. And if we play our cards right, it could be great.
Yeah, that good stuff.
Got it. Okay. Brian, you're at a 501c4, which is to say an organization designed to persuade government officials and others of something they should urgently be, or non-urgently, but in this case I would guess urgently be doing. So I'd love to hear, imagine this is what's your favorite group of elected officials? I know it's kind of a trick question. What's your favorite group of elected officials?
I guess I have to say Congress.
Congress! So here we have Congress, obviously not convened, they're out of session, the House is at least, and they are all ears. They have chosen to attend a Future of the AI session. They don't have a lot of time. What's the elevator speech you want to say? And one other thing is they have just heard from Jason. And they're feeling pretty good about the prospect of, was it 20 or 40% annual GDP growth?
I said 20.
20. But you'd go for 40.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. So that's what they've just heard. And now you've got your brief elevator speech with them. What do you say?
I just hold this to make sure that people can hear me. So I actually think that I probably agree with most of what Jason said. I would just also say that when you're talking about something that could be as transformational as, I guess I would emphasize the uncertainty here. And when you're talking about something that could be as transformational as AI, I think could be, you should think profoundly about the risks before, charging ahead as fast as you possibly can. But I think the benefits could be quite large, and it could be, exactly as Jason said, one of the more positively transformational technologies that we've ever experienced. I think a couple of things that give me pause, though, are that the speed of the change, if we're going to talk about the new intelligence age, if you think about how long it took for the sort of industrial revolution to sort of take off, if we're going to maybe compress that timeline, and even then, that was a lot of social upheaval. So are we ready for that kind of social upheaval, especially if you're talking about a technology that could potentially automate all of cognitive labor? Like, you imagine anybody like me who does most of your work behind a laptop, that AI within the next 5 to 10 years could do that as good or better than a human and way cheaper. What does that mean for our economy? What does it mean for our society? And I guess the other point that I would make is that, again, without gainsaying the potential benefits, I actually think that you don't need to be, this is just how I see it, but you don't need to think that the chance of a sort of catastrophically bad, whoever we want to say, outcome is all that high to justify taking a lot of precautions. Because if we're talking about something that could, wipe out the human race, I think caution is warranted. And so I think
that escalated quickly. Because first you were telling a story that I would call a catastrophic success story. Can we live in a world of this many ice cream sundaes so quickly with so little refrigeration? Like, it's kind of a, oh my gosh, there's going to be a lot of displacement. That's what it takes to get out of the Stone Age, But then, at the end, it feels like you pivoted to something other than sundaes.
Sure. And we can get into the
Yeah.
First of all, I don't know that I would agree with the ice cream analogy. I think, I'm not sure that if it frankly would be a good thing or a bad thing to have, such total displacement of workers. And we can get into the various.
Well, that's a catastrophic part of catastrophic success.
Yeah,
You've got the 20% growth rate, but you don't have the people powering it. Yeah.
Right. And we talk about the different risks. My only point was going to be, even if you think, I think the debate around a lot of this stuff has gotten so warped that you have people who are like, look, I'm a moderate. I just think that there's a 10% chance that AI is going to go catastrophically wrong for humanity. It's 10% chance. Are you getting on an airplane if there's a 10% chance that it crashes? Like, I'm not. And so that's why I tend to dwell, even if I only think, and I don't think it matters much, so I don't have a super precise doom or what have you, but I think even if it's 10% and even if there are big benefits, I'm going to spend my time dwelling on the risks because I think those are the worlds that I'm the most concerned about.
And for the members of Congress assembled in this room hearing you out, if they are nervous about uncertainty, is there something broadly and tightly you're suggesting that they do? Or does it tend to be pretty sectoral and a little of this, a little of that? We got to, I'm reminded of the thought that in technology there's two phases. The first is too early to tell, and the second is too late to do anything about it. And it may be too early to tell, but I hear about the uncertainty. What, if anything, would you be asking a legislative body to do?
So I think the easiest answer there, and the thing that would be most helpful, is just more transparency. requiring transparency from the frontier developers. California just passed a law, that SB 53, that is focused on that sort of thing. I think federalizing that, and you can, around the edges, precisely what sorts of disclosures.
Knowing what's going on is a predicate to knowing what to do and where we're at.
That's right.
Maybe not in that order. And that's it, though. Transparency is kind of your main shopping list item.
I would probably want to go a little farther. I don't want to take us too far down the rabbit hole. Things like third-party audits, pre-deployment testing of models. But I agree with you that it's really the technology. It's evolving fast, but I wouldn't really want to get too far out in front with very heavy-handed regulation. Even as a safetyist, I'll take the label.
And last question on this front: what's your comfort level? No wrong answer. With what appears to be principally private sector development driven through the highly, this is maybe not a term of art, YOLO model of founder and VC driven, generate a noodle, throw it on the wall. If you go bankrupt, start your next startup. If it sticks, cash in your NVIDIA shares. Is that an okay model of development for this possibly transformative tech?
So I know from my perspective, because it creates this race dynamic where I actually think the biggest problem here is that we are, and what I feel most strongly about is I'm not sure if, should we pause, should we slow down, how long, lots of hard questions. I just think it's not good that we are going forward as fast as we possibly can. Nobody at these labs even feels like they can sleep because they got to beat their competitor. And so we end up in this thing where we end up with a dynamic where everyone is going fast forward as fast as they can. For most technologies, I wouldn't have a problem with that, but for this one, I do think that there's a role for government probably at some point along the way to backstop it.
Okay. The very interesting complement to the transparency thing. That's starting to sound like it might be the kind of thing that would make Jason uncomfortable. But we're going to find out later because we're turning to Amba now. Thank you. Welcome back to BKC. So great. Thank you again for joining us in what looks like, unless it's just a Zoom background, a highly acoustically shielded studio.
It is indeed the podcast room of our co-working space. So hello from New York City, where the air is very, feels different this morning. And thank you all for making this work.
Thank you for your euphemism. Just hearing the conversation so far, where would you like to come into it? Is there anything either that you're already vibrating, wanting to manifestly agree with, disagree with, or a point that maybe we haven't even covered in the AI threat or menace kind of framework?
My head is more towards the latter, but maybe to just create some continuity with what we just heard. I think what's clear is that transformational is doing a lot of work in how we're talking about AI and AI technologies, but also it's a little bit of an empty signifier in that is being asserted as if we all know what it means for a technology to be transformative and for that to be a good thing. But I think that's sort of concealing a lot of ruptures under the surface, which is, I think, what we're here to talk about. So with that teaser, I'll say that I think our concern or our orientation towards AI and the work at AI Now, we engage in kind of research, advocacy, policy, strategies, a lot of different, ways and means to get at this, at what we see are pretty deep and structural concerns with the current trajectory we're on. We think it needs to be challenged. The industry set trajectory for AI needs to be challenged. It needs to be reimagined. And our central concerns with AI have to do with power. For reasons that trace back to the almost 70-year-old history of this technology, the current trajectory of AI is set to worsen concentration of power in a very, very narrow section of the tech industry. And again, this is more in the realm of, I think we're just stating facts, but it's a path, a trajectory where advancement is synonymous with scale, in access to capital, to key inputs, to pathways to monetization, like how do we make any money out of all of this, which at this moment, the very, the most giant tech companies disproportionately control. And the news flash here is that this isn't by accident. So large-scale AI is not just continuing or building on the last decade of concentrating power in Silicon Valley. It is a product of it. And so I think that is our central diagnosis. We think it's an unmitigated bad thing in terms of the concentrated power in the tech industry. We think that is an unmitigated bad for markets, for democracy, and indeed for national security, for the obvious reasons that single points of failure often are. But maybe what I'll just say, because alongside our diagnosis of what is keeping us up at night, is that this diagnosis isn't just admiring the problem accurately, although I think that is very important to do. It is often in our work about kind of introducing a discipline to all of our strategies for resistance, for reimagination, to say, is this move or is this policy a campaign, is it going to inadvertently or directly lead to worsening the problem of concentration of power? And I look here to my colleagues, particularly those that have, like Brian, maybe we can talk a little bit more about this later, but I think many of the ruptures come not from a disagreement that something should be done, but about what are the kinds of policy interventions or other interventions that would meaningfully do something to challenge what feels like a very ossified concentration of power in this market. And maybe we'll come back to it later, but if we don't, I do want to say, in the spirit of workshopping names, that a Skeptics camp is really not a party that anyone, not me, wants to be at. And so I would like to vote for something that gets at something that conveys a more optimistic note, because we do believe that the path we're on is broken, and it will require some audacious hope to imagine a different one.
Got it. All right. Well, we can continue to workshop names together. Skeptic does seem to be has a naysaying quality to it, perhaps, although I tend to like to think of critic as not somebody who hates food or movies, but is just somewhat discerning about them. But of course, critic and skeptic are pretty close in our embeddings, as we would put it today. It might be, if I had to do a word cloud of what you were saying, it sounds like concentration would be big and in the middle. And you're wanting the opposite of concentration. Is that like democratization or distributed or shared kind of thing? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, I would say along with concentration would be power. So I think the question is, we are seeing a concentration of power. There are many ways to get at it. One could be through more structural means of decentralizing power in the market, but also, and almost in parallel, would be just introducing meaningful accountability for this market, in the absence of which we see some of the pathologies that come from both scale but also concentrated power.
Uh-huh. This might sound like a very specific question, but it may help us kind of draw some lines that are helpful. And I think after asking you, I'd maybe turn to Brian for reactions. Would you prefer a world in which the genie goes back in the bottle or never materializes, that we just didn't, if we're dwelling among LLMs, which of course are only one flavor of AI, that they just never managed to, cohere into soup? Or, so long as we've got them now, would it be a better world in which some discoveries happen in the next 3 months that would let us do what the most advanced language models do right now on our laptops? So that GPT-5 is something everybody is capable of running on a Mac or a PC or a Linux box or something, and can tune it or hire somebody else to tune it or something, truly democratizing it. Would that be a good thing or a bad thing? With my supposition being that might be a way of trying to, at least at a technical layer only, decentralize some of the power.
So to the second point first, which is I would take, I would probably want to contest the idea that by decentralization, we mean that everybody gets to fine tune these models on their systems or anything akin to the kind of discourse we've seen in the open source world. I think the question of access has too long been sort of slow to reckon with the questions of economic value distribution. The two are not the same, and we're actually seeing the perils of that kind of rhetoric around access as being synonymous with decentralization. We have so many examples, many of which I think I've drawn from the Berkman community of why the two are not the same. So one is to say, I think we should complicate the notion of what decentralization means. And by that, I mean, if this is a kind of market where the frontier is defined by, a kind of scale which in some ways requires or tends itself to a market like the one we have today, and probably an even more hyper consolidated market, and where then all of the sort of downstream the kind of downstream activity also in some ways eventually ends up reconcentrating or, the value distribution basically, even as the pie grows, is mostly enriching the very few and creating pretty untenable, both politically and economically untenable concentrations of power. So I don't lose the thread. Do I think we should be engaging in how do we make the current ecosystem so that these companies cannot shut the door behind them? How do we introduce structural competition and other kinds of interventions that shake this market up in a more fundamental way? Yes, and that's most of what we do. But do I think that there is some value to at least having the conversation of putting the genie back in the bottle? Yes, but probably in a slightly different way from what I imagine Brian or others from the safety community might imagine, which is that I think that there's something less well understood, which is that the current research trajectory for artificial intelligence has been set by, culminated within, and follows the incentive structures of the largest tech companies, because we don't actually have a vibrant research ecosystem outside of industry-funded labs. And in some ways, like there are, far and few exceptions, but it is not a vibrant space, and that's possibly why conversations about what advancement look like have, sort of are happening on terms that happen to be, again, not by accident, neatly aligned with the incentive structures of the largest companies. So we're really interested in having conversations with technologists that, go all the way back to AlexNet to 2012 and ask that question of like, what were other modes of building that maybe put some of these principles of decentralization, at the core of a kind of as an operating principle, and then think about what tech trajectories we want to be building on.
Got it. Thank you so much. And it does sound like, without explicitly committing to it, you're sounding generally positive on the idea, not simply of just democratized access, but fine-tuning and control over the code, if it could be localized hypothetically. And Brian, maybe I can just ask you that same question. From your perspective, if it were AI everywhere, AI now, AI everywhere, AI forever, does that create that much less of an opportunity to apply bottlenecks, guardrails, stuff? If everyone builds it, everyone dies. Or is that somehow mitigating of some of the catastrophic existential concerns you might have?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, I think I agree with most of what Amba said. I think the concentration of power in the AI sector, that's one that maybe I'm not, a faithful representative of the safety community. I can't sort of speak for others, but...
You'll find out soon on.
Yeah, that's one of the threat models of AI that I worry the most about, in that one company could sort of, and again, I don't know, I don't have strong positions about just how likely this is, but it's a sort of runaway, super intelligent AI and then uses it to run sort of the economy. And I totally agree with Amba again, that economic power, political power, all wrapped up together. And I think you can see that with things like the export controls that we had on China, and now NVIDIA, a huge corporation, is being able to engage the Trump administration to, further cement its sort of market position market dominance. So I do think that I'm not sure what, on the open source question specifically, I think there are hard questions there. And so I'm not going to say that necessarily the way to solve this is, everybody sort of what Amba said, frankly, like that everybody having access to a model is the way to ensure that we don't have concentration of power. But the specific thing that I would put forward in the here and now is more just antitrust enforcement. I think that would be a good thing. I assume that Amba and I would agree about that being a good thing. You look at all of these deals that OpenAI is doing to sort of vertically integrate. That gives me pause as somebody who spends most of my time worrying about the more catastrophic risks.
Yeah, it is kind of a weird Scooby-Doo situation where every person you encounter, you rip off the mask, and underneath it's GPT-5 powering yet another Delta consumer assistance agent. And Delta might be perfectly happy if they had an alternative they felt screwed up at the same rate as a GPT-5. I don't know, Jason, I just want to invite you back into the conversation here. Either anything along the way so far since you last spoke that you heard that you're wanting to take issue with or amplify, or on this open source question. I could see either way. I could see you being perfectly happy with the more the merrier, right? I don't know.
Yeah. So we're talking about concentration of power, so let's talk about that. So first off, I don't know. This is a real concern. I don't think I'm as worried about it as the other panelists. First off, we don't have just one major lab that's leading the way on everything, right? We don't even have just two, right? There are 3, 4, 5 major labs that are pretty, if they're not quite at the frontier, they're pretty close to it. So we're very far from a situation where you'd have like a single point of failure or a single kind of choke point. So I think that's a good thing. Some of these labs are releasing the models open source, even open weights, right? So this scenario where you can run something close to the frontier on your laptop, I think we're there already, right? That already exists. Now, as I understand it, the models that you can run on your laptop are maybe somewhat behind the frontier. Maybe they will always be, I don't know, a year or two behind the frontier. But there's going to come a point where that might not matter so much, just like it doesn't matter today whether you have, the latest iPhone or the iPhone from 2 years ago. They're not, they're all that different. You hit a certain point, you get diminishing returns. So, I think we're going to be in a world where I think there is no putting the genie back in the bottle. I think we're going to be in a world where this power is out there and is broadly distributed, for better and for worse. I also think we should step back from this from a too narrow focus on kind of like how many companies are running this or that kind of thing, and just think more broadly about what this is going to do for the world. I think there are ways in which AI could be enormously democratizing of power. So here's just in society broadly. So here's just an example. Navigating the legal system, right? If you get in any kind of legal issue today, large or small, right? Good luck navigating the system that we have today without an enormous amount of money to pay lawyers to help you, or actually being a lawyer yourself. We're here at Harvard. We probably got some lawyers in the audience, but you have a certain privilege of knowing how to navigate the system, which is built by and for lawyers, and the average person can't afford that at all, right? So very soon, if not already, we're going to be in a world where anybody can get that kind of guidance and assistance and navigate the system. Similar thing with all kinds of professional advice and help, right? Where right now it is a privilege of the wealthy to be able to afford to pay people high rates.
Can I just ask, how many people in this room have asked earnestly of a large language model of some kind about a medical issue you've been having and then credited the advice you got back from it? Just let me know with a hand up. Fewer than I would have guessed, actually. And one who was like kind of waving their hand, not to be recognized, but maybe it was an iffy answer. Interesting.
Yeah, not only that,
yes.
but, within my social circle alone, I have heard of at least 2 cases where people claim that giving a medical question to an AI model actually saved their life or the life of somebody in the family, which is, that blows me away.
Got it. I'd like to open it up to questions, and I'll let our Jess's team see what questions we have online. In fact, some of them appear to be breaking through the Zoom window in front of us as we go, but only the first 4 words, for which we do token completion. Let's do this. If you want to identify yourself, feel free. If you don't, depending on your view about Rocco's basilisk, do not. Just if you can keep it brief. Yeah.
Okay. Hi. So I'll just switch to what you guys are talking about and focus the attention on you. So when I think of transformative, I'm thinking more in terms of, somebody who is not me being able to take care of my parents, like they're elderly, something that I can, as I age, I want to be able to do information synthesis in the same way that I used to through all my life, and wear something, maybe internally, externally that enables that. So I think in terms of augmenting human abilities, and then also in terms of improving lives in a fundamental way for the way that people exist and they want to, right? So I guess my question is, in what view do we think that is, potent, or it's something that can be produced, I guess, in terms of the next 5 years or next 10 years,
Yep.
But at the same time, in terms of safety or guardrails, if the internet was being developed, would it have gotten to this point? The internet economy, the digital economy is powering so many other places now because of what it has, because it was enabled the way that it is, it was able to do that. But then I guess if we hold back on letting these other technologies do that, wouldn't we be sort of holding back on progress, I guess?
Got it. So the first part of the question was, at the risk of distilling it too much, angel on your shoulder. Wouldn't it be nice? And in fact, you even went there with Neuralink or equivalent of angel in your head, ready to be your, apologies to Microsoft, co-pilot as you navigate times good and bad. And I don't know, Jason, do you want to just be a +1 to that, or?
Yeah, sure. I don't know if I would want to have it literally, sort of whispering in my ear and reading my thoughts all the time. Maybe. It depends on how much I trusted the security model. Look, let me just...
It's at least as good as the internet.
Let me just say, I think when you think about a scenario like that, you can think about a lot of amazing things that could do for you in your life. And I think it will. You can also dream up a lot of nightmare scenarios about that. I just want to say, we were talking beforehand about optimism, and I made a statement that was maybe surprising to you, which is I do not like to describe myself as an optimist, because optimism tends to, optimism about things like this tends to make it just kind of look on the bright side and maybe not think about all the potential risks of this. I think that what happens with technology is largely up to us and is largely about how we use it. I think that it is up to us to develop a healthy relationship with our technology. In many technologies, we have the potential for abuse and an unhealthy relationship, everything from food to media to, you name it. AI is totally going to be like this, right? I think at its best, AI could magnify human agency. It could help you realize any goal or dream or value that you have. At its worst, we could, if we aren't careful, cede all of our agency to AI. Right? We could allow our faculty of choice and guidance to wither and atrophy because we're just letting it run our lives.
And it sounds then, again, this is going to be me briefly putting words in your mouth, you might be open to a role for the regulatory establishment in pushing things towards the first future rather than the second.
I think what I'm talking about is much more a matter of individual choice and of...
With enough transparency, the markets will figure this out.
I think it's up to each individual, just like it is to develop a healthy relationship with food. There's only so far that the government, what can the government do to make sure that people, without instituting an absolutely draconian, state that wants to ban soft drinks and Twinkies, right?
There might be answers to that. I don't know. This is getting on the turf of the Food and Drug Law Clinic. We're not allowed. Sorry. Good question. Amba, you might have views on this.
So many in response to that question. Maybe the most important one that I can imagine would be something the Berkman community can discuss for hours and days is I don't think the internet is a useful, in fact, I think it is a very counterproductive analogy to what we're seeing with AI. The internet was based on certain design principles, like I mentioned before, that at the core of which was a kind of open and decentralized approach. What we saw was a decade then of unregulated by the US and most parts of the rest of the world, unregulated commercial surveillance. We saw a slow and steady gating, the platformization of the internet. There were many factors that I think led to the kind of highly concentrated ecosystem that we have today. And I think it is important to understand that AI and this particular paradigm of large-scale AI, as I mentioned before, is building on, it is a product of, and it is currently supercharging this concentration. Now, to the other question of, will the market fix itself and yes or no, I don't think we need to debate this in 2025, because I think we've seen, again, from the last 10 years, where the tech industry goes when the market is largely left to its own devices, when personalized advertising, behavioral targeting is the business model, or has been the business model of the internet, what the kind of social implications of that are on everybody, but especially on younger people and on children. So I think that's number two. And number three, since I may not get the chance again, I do want to come to myth bust a little bit on the idea that we have more than one player in the foundation model space, therefore competition. I think it's important to note there is still no self-sustaining competitor to big tech. And the word I'm underlining here is self-sustaining, which means either independent of their agreements with infrastructure providers or anyone that is not cash-rich through other sources of revenue. And we're actually seeing the fault lines of that play out in the current kind of bubble dynamics. It's the OpenAIs and the Oracles that are going to, more and more shady and risky sources of private credit to really withstand what it takes for this paradigm to continue to advance. And so I see the path forward looks like hyper-consolidation unless there is a shakeup. And I would argue there should be a shakeup using the heft of the regulatory state.
Thanks very much, Amba. And taking your cue that there may not be that many more opportunities to speak because time is flying by, I'd like to take two questions sequentially, wherever the mic has found itself or Murli brings it. Thank you, Murli, or wherever there might already be one. And then, Jess, if there's anything you want to summarize from the questions accruing in the virtual space, and then we can bring it back to the panelists. So, real quick, go for it.
Hi, I'm Moritz from the Kennedy School. My question is regarding basically the two kind of world models that you two have. As I understand, kind of your model, as in it speeds up economic growth, AI. And then the question for me is if we develop it now versus in 10 years, but we have 20%, economic growth, you kind of hit infinity very quickly. So the benefit of developing AI as fast as possible is kind of getting these really high growth rates earlier. Versus kind of your model is, well, there might be a 1 in 10% or like 1 in 10 chance of this going really wrong. And then all this future value is basically not there anymore. So that question would be, in your model, what would kind of the risk need to be for you to change your mind and say, actually, waiting 10 more years is like a good idea? Versus in your model, like how low does the risk need to be for you to say, oh, actually, let's take the guardrails off?
Got it. Great question about risk preferences and variances in them. There's other hands up there. I don't know if there's two mics or one. Cruz, please. Yes, there we go. Madeline.
This might go well with that question. The accelerationist argument so far has been an economic one, but I would say there's undercurrents of religiosity throughout AI companies and also individual kind of AI psychosis use. So while you can attempt to regulate economics and you can go for corporate transparency, I'm curious the panelists' take on individual, but not necessarily institutional, but perhaps cultural, religious underpinnings towards the drive to something like AGI and kind of a Nick Land-esque world. How do you approach that as an engine for progress or disaster?
Got it. And before we have plenty on the plate, but Jess, anything worth, or anybody else monitoring the online world, anything worth introducing, particularly that dovetails with these two questions?
Well, we have a couple of questions about what the role of AI in labor markets and just kind of questioning, I guess, the AI in exploiting labor markets. Someone says, as in, what if AI is never going to do your job better than you could, but it could do it well enough to convince your boss to fire you, even if the actual output is worse?
Which, good enough. A lot of people, as you were referencing, Jason, that might be Harvard Law folks, if you do really great at the bar exam, you studied too much. So what do the economists say? If you've never missed a flight in your life, you're probably getting to the airport too early. Interesting way, though, of thinking about quality versus other elements of efficiency like price or time. Okay, so a ton on the table. I don't know, Brian, if we should start with you, and in particular on the religiosity question, for which it sounded a little bit like religiosity as an input. To what extent are we having quasi-religious commitments about the world we may be giving way to? And it was even maybe a little flavor of that about to what extent is it going to culturally impact people and their own sense of self or spirit to have these new creatures in our midst?
Oh boy. I think I do. I mean, I think it's easy to see the parallels when frankly, being in DC, I probably get this less than people who live in San Francisco, so I'm maybe channeling other folks, but the sort of like, AGI is going to solve all of our problems, so it's like, let's not worry, we're just going to go race all out for artificial general intelligence. I'm sure folks are familiar with the term, and we don't need to worry about these other problems. And I mean, I definitely see the religious, a parallel to maybe religious thinking in another age, and I think that there are dangers there. And I think to maybe just quickly, because there was, I guess, to me in my mind, maybe it's connected with something that Jason said about this really being about individual choice, and I think that is a place where maybe we would disagree a little bit. And the analogy that I would look at is like social media, where you could have said, well, it's up to every individual to sort of design their own relationship with their algorithm. But I think that doesn't really take into account the way these companies.
In Soviet Russia, algorithm chooses you.
Well, they're just really good at sort of like hacking our evolutionary evolved systems. And I fear with AI that you see sycophancy. I think somebody said psychosis. This is how part of it got connected in my mind. I think these chatbots are going to get really good, and we're already seeing them at sort of in the same way, and it sort of, but crowding out in the same way that sort of social media did, maybe crowding out more fulfilling relationships in people's lives. So anyway.
Which means, though, just to be clear, because I heard Jason raising a little bit of a parade of horribles about bringing the regulatory establishment to bear by using the analogy to junk food or something. Are you prepared for this group or Congress, take your pick, to try to say, here is something a company wants to provide, and here is something a customer / user / human person wants to consume, and you want to say, wait a minute, no, we're not going to let that happen.
Yeah, in the same way that we do that with illegal drugs.
Uh-huh. Or occasionally with casinos. Yep.
Right. Things that would, addiction, I think would be the word that you would use.
Yep. Amba's about to jump out of the screen with something to say, but we're going to save it for the last word because Jason, love to hear you grapple aloud with this thread we're talking about.
So to directly respond to that briefly, I'll just say, when I say responsibility is on us to create a healthy relationship with our technology, that responsibility is partly on individuals, partly on the makers of products, who I think should be thinking about, can this product be used healthily, unhealthily? How can I push it towards healthy? I think it's
and if it could be used unhealthily but highly profitably, what do you do?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think these things are tough questions that have to be grappled with case by case. I don't think there's a blanket answer about all these things. Let me try to address a few of the questions from the audience in kind of one go. When I was prepping for this panel, I asked ChatGPT to tell me about the panelists and what they believe, and it told me that evidently I'm supposed to be the representative of accelerationism, which is a surprise to me because I don't think of myself that way. I don't like that term.
God, none of these terms is really working. You
No,
were ready to take safetyism. Yeah. What would you call it instead from your point of view?
Yeah, well, so I mean, let me just say why.
Yeah.
So accelerationism, I think, sometimes gets associated with. I mean, the way I think about it is this idea that it's almost taking technology as like an end in itself. And so, for me, the reason I call myself a techno-humanist is because I see technology as a means to the end of human life, human well-being, thriving and flourishing. So that's what it's about. Technology is not an end in itself. And I have never, by the way, said that we should develop AI as fast as possible. And I don't agree with that. Look, let's just take a simple analogy. Drug development. Should we develop drugs as fast as possible? Well, what would that mean? Does that mean we skip clinical trials? Hey, we got a drug, let's just put it out on the market. Yeah, we used to do that. That was not a good idea, right? People died from that. So we decided, okay, we have to test these things before they go to the market. Same thing with AI, right? We should not just finish a model. Okay, great, release it. We should test the products before they go on the market. Fortunately, that is already happening. And some large, new AI models have received extensive months and months of careful testing, and you can read, long dozens or hundreds of page documents about all the testing that they did. There are entire organizations now dedicated to coming up with new ways to test AI, third-party evals, and all sorts of things. In fact, I can't think of an industry that has actually done more thinking about safety and risk ahead of actual product development than AI. Now, you might still say it's not enough, given the risk. But if you just look in general over the course of history about how we have released technologies, the standard thing is to release it first, then have some accidents, then create some disasters, then look back and sort of see how it's going. The amount of foresight that has gone into thinking ahead of time about the kinds of ways that AI might go wrong and then trying to test for that, we're actually, I think, doing better than on that front than humanity has ever done.
Before we turn to Amba, because Amba is going to get the last word here, and I'm trying to maintain what, if any, are the differences among just at least the four of us here. Jason, would you say that we are, therefore, just picking up on just what you were saying, more or less on the right track? We don't want to be passive. That's the problem with optimism. It's not going to work out automatically, but attention is being given to the problems. Testing is happening. We're more or less on the right track right now. Can you get behind that? Would you hum for that?
Yeah. More or less.
Got it. And Brian, would you hum for that?
No.
All right, good. That's, for rhetorical purposes, that is helpful to see just how much autopilot with human assistance is going to get us there. Amba, are we more or less on the right track?
So I missed the longer version of the question. What could you say it again?
It's okay to go with the shorter version. Are we more or less on the right track with AI? There's some suggestions you'd have. There's some regulation we could do. But, this is normal technology going to infuse, and it's got problems like any other, but, we've got this.
Oof. Technology being normal, I think I could get behind, but I would say on...
I'm borrowing from Arvind Narayanan.
Yes, exactly. I
yes.
think I would have much shared ground with that particular perspective, but I think the environment within which political, regulatory, all the fun stuff within which this technology has been born and is developing is really a cause for concern. So then I would be like, no, that's literally what is keeping us up at night and motivating our work, is that we think this is not an environment that is primed to impose the most common sense guardrails, responsibility and accountability on an industry that, if it is to be as transformational as it sounds like many of us, at least at a hazy sense, agree it will be, seems like a no-brainer. So that's where I'd go there. I was trying to jump out of the screen earlier. I really was, because I was going to say what you followed up with, which is I think we just need to keep talking about incentives. Where do incentives align with the public interest, right? Where companies have put in the work on safety, it's been because they've put in resources for reinforcement learning, for human feedback. Why? Because earlier versions, like Microsoft's racist chatbot, wouldn't sell, but sycophancy sells. So does addictive design. So does erotica for children. Like, I think these are pretty common sense. The market won't fix it kind of pieces. And so I think just always drilling down to the incentive structures that are fueling this current version of the tech industry. And there's a lot to draw from the last 10 years.
Well, thank you. We have covered so much ground in just 60 minutes. I think it's largely terra incognito, at least terra uncertain. And I see before all of us an invitation to be trying to situate ourselves within it. What priors are we bringing to it? What expectations? What hopes? What worries? And what parts of those are descriptive, subject maybe to, if there were more transparency, to being able to get better gauges to tell us where we're at? What parts are more on the religious spectrum, about our faith, our confidence, our sense of what we think might be irreducibly human, no matter how well or how cheaply the machine counterpart might be able to do it. And all of those are being asked right now as this stuff is suffusing, taking on board Jason's point that, that's the normal way we release technologies, more or less, and be interesting to, really reflect on that more as well. Who should own answering these questions? Who should own, if we get answers, dealing with what to do next with the answers in hand? That remains, I think, very unclear too, in a world in which we're still not sure what we want. We don't trust anybody to give it to us, but it sure seems like we need it now. And AI can scale it. I call those the 3.5 laws of digital governance. Please join me in thanking our panelists for covering so much ground today and taking up this challenge so well. We hope you'll like, click, and subscribe, and continue on this journey with us. We'll see you later. Thank you, Amba, too, for coming in from far. Cheers.